This is the first time I'm doing this. I've done a number of performances before, but this is kind of the first online performance like this I've done. So please be gentle if I stumble. So let me share my screen and I'll tell you a little bit about what you can expect from tonight. So tonight is going to be storytelling, a little bit of myth, a little bit of fact, probably more myth than fact, I think. This is the story of Arwald, the last British pagan king and the last king of the Isle of Wight. This is going to be a dramatic storytelling of the last battle between Arwald and Wihtwala. Wihtwala being the I guess the bad guy in this scenario, in this story. So let's jump straight into it. So what do we know? What are the actual facts? Well, it's kind of scant. We don't have a lot of knowledge about Arwald. All we know is what was written in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle and what the Venerable Bede has said. And those two accounts are, they sometimes conflict a little bit with dates and times like that. So what I'm going to be talking about here is what a little bit about what we do know, and I'm going to try and put this in context of where we're talking about at the moment. So this is the southeast of England, and this is the area. These are the Anglo-Saxon and Jutish kingdoms. And we're kind of concerning ourselves with this area here in the southeast. Wihtwala was a king from Wessex. He was exiled and came back and did a deal with a chap called Wilfrid, who is an archbishop, and basically he agreed to march under the banner of the cross, and he would then give lands and money to the church. Wihtwala wanted to be what was called the Wihtwalda, the Wihtwalda being the king of the Britons. So he kind of marched from the West Saxons or Wessex right through over to your right, which is Canterbury, or the Wihtwara, Wihtwara being Jutish, and then through the South Saxons, then back through the Wihtwara, which they're also Jutish, and then onto the Wihtwara, which is the Isle of Wight, conquering and to take the lands. And that's kind of what we're talking about here. So just to put that in context. So here we go. Here's a timeline for you, and it's rough. Around between 661 and 686 was when Arwald came to power. I'm taking liberties and I'm saying 661. I like to think that he was in power for 20 odd years, 25 years. Now, in 678, sort of halfway through Arwald's reign, we have a comet that was seen, which was seen as an omen of doom. I like to think that they would have seen that on the island, and they knew that something impending was coming. 681, Wihtwala started his power grab. By 685, he was marching through. He and Wilfrid take Wessex, and 685, in the middle of 685, there was blood rain through England. Another omen. 685, 686, Wihtwala has taken Kent and Sussex, and right at the beginning of 686, 22nd of this month, Arwald was defeated. And we're centering ourselves on this little last bit here of the story. We're not so interested in the other parts. So the story is about what was called the Gretal, the Great Reckoning, the time of the time to settle accounts, the time of change. And I guess you could equate that to Judgment Day, the same sort of thing. And that's what we're talking about here, the Gretal. Right. So 678, this is from the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. This year appeared the comet star in August and shone every morning during 3 months like a sunbeam. That must have been an event that was terrifying to these people. And I assume, and I think Arwald must have had that deep within his psyche. Right. So if you want to sit back and get ready, we'll start. The crashing of blades rang out like shrill echoes through the now chilling afternoon air. The clash of axes against shields and the shattering of timber was like a disjointed drumbeat that thumped over and over. And all the while, there were the screams of the wounded, writhing in pain as the beach ran crimson with blood. The last pagan king, the great Wihtwalda, protector of the Yelfan kind, son of Woden himself, Arwald, looked up from his bloody battlefield. The king turned to his most trusted and beloved thane, Eardstapper. The time is now. We are softening, everyone. This is the moment, and I must seize it. And I call upon my brother, the Tira, to guide my final battle blow against the godless traitor who pollutes our land. Eardstapper readied his sword, looked to his king, and declared, "To their death, Wihtwalda!" "No," replied Arwald. "You have a greater duty. You must, at all costs, secure our line. If anything happens to me, you must take the boys, our kin, in the Wihtwara, awaiting. From there, you must take them to my sister in the Wihtwara. Swear it, Eardstapper." He grabbed the arm of his friend and whispered, "Swear it." Nodding his head, Eardstapper agreed. Arwald looked up at his friend. His battle-hardened face was fierce and worthy, and at that moment he knew his friend would do his duty. "Now go. You must lead the men while I fight." The two men nodded, grunted, bashed their shields together. They turned without another word and left each other for one final time. The Wihtwalda scanned the carnage about him, and in his current state of hyper-awareness, everything moved in slow motion. His keen eyes scanned the beach until he finally saw who he was looking for. He gripped his sword by the hilt, spat angrily on the ground, and ran with every drop of strength that he had left. Arwald's men were falling one by one to the superior numbers of the heretics' army, and he knew it. He had seen all the signs, and in his heart of hearts, he knew that the demigoddess, the Wihtwalda, had made her choice, and she had chosen to spare the great heretic Wihtwala. His heart pounding and blood rushing through his ears. All he could think of at that very moment was to land a final and killing blow on his opponent. He was sidestepping people and bodies, weaving this way and way that, fighting off flailing blows from swords and axes. Arwald made his way to the group of heavily armored men that surrounded Wihtwala. These were his housecarls, the bodyguards of the heretic, an impenetrable line that surrounded their lord, and not one that could easily be broken. However, on this day, as Arwald approached, the men heard their lord bark out a command. "Let the Wihtwalda through." Arwald, battered and bruised, blood, some his and some of the slain, dripping down his arms, his face painted white and blue from the sacred pigment of the island, stopped. He clutched the hilt of his sword once again and stood his ground silently as his eyes burnt holes through Wihtwala. The two men looked at each other, burning in that moment. All sights and sounds fell away, and it was only them. With a curled lip and a look of disdain on the heretic's face, he shouted out, "I give you a choice, king of the Wihtwalda. Lay down your sword, forfeit this place, and bow before me. If you do this, I will spare what is left of your men." "I will never. You are not worthy to stand on this sacred ground. You who swear no allegiance to anything but your own stinking power," replied Arwald, as he spat to the ground again. For a moment, Wihtwala said nothing, just pointed all around him, laughing at the death that he had wrought against the Wihtwara. Then, with hatred and utter contempt, he raised his sword and screamed, "So be it. This filthy swine is mine." The two men ran at each other with speed and agility that could only be fueled by conviction and bile, swinging their swords with more force than either had been able to muster before. Their blows were so hard it knocked each one backwards, their balance hindered by the sand beneath their feet. Arwald was first up and charged again, using his shoulder behind his shield to clash directly into Wihtwala like some sort of human battering ram, and the heretic fell back once more. Wihtwala stood, but before he could center himself, Arwald came at him again, this time jumping at his body and knocking him to his feet, off his feet. By hiding behind his housecarls, Wihtwala was not battle weary and therefore had the advantage. He was able to move as a little more swiftly, even on all fours. He grabbed his sword and seized the opportunity to edge further down the beach to where the sand was damp and more compact. Arwald came in once more, and this time he had his sword raised high, ready for the death blow. But Wihtwala had seen it coming, and now on more solid ground was able to pull himself up and thrust his sword deep into the belly of the Wihtwalda. The king of the Wihtwara stood, then stopped mid-lunge and looked down at Wihtwala, who was now getting up off the ground. A searing pain filled Arwald's body, and the hot blood was welling up through his throat, flowing out of his mouth. He knew these were his last moments. He felt his life draining from him as he tried to lift his sword one more time. Wihtwala grimaced and grinned, moved in close, grabbed the hair of Arwald and whispered in his ear, "I would have killed you anyway, you know. At least this way, I get to see the life drain out of your pathetic, dutish eyes." Arwald coughed, blood spilling out from his lips, but he was able to raise a smile as he croaked. You are cursed, Cadvala. From this day forth, you are not a whole man, and the blood my sword now tastes will be like venom in your blood. And with one final act, he pushed his sword into the side of Cadvala. Both men slumped to the ground, and a great silence fell over the battlefield. Eardstapa rushed to the side of his king and dragged him up the beach, as Cadvala's men dragged him away also. Great black clouds gathered above the island as the first cracks of lightning rippled overhead, and the powerful throngs of thunder filled their ears. Arwald's men cried out as one, "The Wihtwalda is dead!" They sounded the voices all as one. They shrouded the body of their now fallen king and held their swords and shields in formation. "Protect the son of Woden at all costs," shouted Earstopper, and the formation readied themselves. In moments like this, a single drop can feel like it takes an eternity to fall. In the deafening silence that was now surrounding them, they all waited for that single drop. The other place was near. The shades and spectres of the dead hung thick in the air, and at that moment, they all knew that silence of that moment that reigned supreme. And then it started. The first few drops of rain hit the ground, then their faces. Each drop was cold and heavy. Each drop stung the weary survivors. Yet none said a word, just waited. "Cadvala lives! Praise be the Lord Almighty! Cadvala lives!" was the cry from the housecarls. Arwald's men stood their ground, ready to do their duty. Then through the beating rain came a feeble voice of Cadvala. "Let them go. Let the remaining Wihtwara go and bury their king." Cadvala and his men watched as the last Wihtwara army picked up Arwald and took him silently into the heart of the island. Not a word was spoken, and no one looked back. The night was upon them all, and none of Cadvala's men wanted to stay in this place. The tide was coming in, and one by one the bodies were being dragged out to sea. The red stains marked the bloody passage of the battlefield, and the bodies being dragged out seemed like they were moving by some unseen hand. Even though the army of Cadvala marched under the cross, beliefs in the old way still ran deep. Every man knew that tonight Helan would be coming to take the dead away. They knew that it was no longer a place of the living. For if you sleep amongst the shades of the dead, death herself may mistake you for one of her own. Now deep within the wooded canopy of the Wight, Arwald had been laid on a bed of timber. And although Cadvala had let them take their king, no man trusted the heretic, so they moved swiftly. They say that the old gods cried out in pain that night, that they had met their match with the new. For the people of the island believe that the magic that all beings need, godlike or not, was lessened that day. Finally, the Gretal was upon them, the great reckoning, the time to settle accounts. where the old would be swept away and chaos would reign supreme. And the old gods finally took their leave and went to sleep under the great dragon of the island. The Wihtwara, the archmagus, with his ill-fitting robes and great staff made of hazel, arrived. He was an old man now, but still cut an imposing figure. As he walked down the ancient path, he caught sight of Wihtwara and nodded. Both men knew what was to be done. The rites must be performed, shouted the old man as the body of the king lay crumpled on the timber. He turned to the women folk and called for them to clean his body and clothe him. Lastly, he turned to speak to the Fox King himself, that magical protector whose soul filled the woodlands and holy places. With his arms held high, his staff in one hand and sword in the other, he called out into the night, Fox King, I implore thee, guide the spirit of our king, son of Woden, the Wihtwalda, to his new life of glory. Guide him upon the wings of the ravens. Guide him now, so as you have guided him before, swiftly now, before the enemies of our world come upon us again. The Wihtwara anointed the king and kissed his lifeless cheeks, turned to Arwald's wife and sons. He kneeled down to the children's level and spoke to them softly. You are the kings now. You hold the heart of this sacred isle in your hands. Its blood courses through your veins. You must be brave, for now you must leave your mother and be men. But it won't always be this way. You will not be alone. Wihtwara will be with you, and he will protect you as if you are his sons. Wihtwara walked forward, took the hand of the queen and kissed it and said, My lady, I have sworn to protect the Aethelings, and I will do my duty. Tonight I will take them through to the Wihtwara, and then on to your sister-in-law's court. A curse upon me to wander the lands alone if I fail, forever. He felt like he was stealing them from his mother's arms, this woman who had known them from before they were born, this woman who was a sister to him. He looked into her eyes. He felt her total heartbreak, but knew in the face of all this, she must stand tall and strong until they all find each other again. The queen spoke to the Aethelings quietly and privately. She placed blessings upon their foreheads, kissed them one last time. She prayed to the goddess Frigg to look after them. She prayed that they would find their way home one day soon. With that final farewell, Wihtwara took the children into the night. Postscript. The boys never made it to their aunt. They were betrayed mere days after landing on the Wihtwara. Wihtwala somehow had known the children, was there and intercepted them, had them slaughtered to ensure that the house of Wight was extinguished. Not satisfied in killing Arwald and his sons, Wihtwala sent men for the rest of the noble houses on the Isle of Wight and committed what can only be called genocide, wiping out all but a portion of the peasantry. It was a bloodthirsty act that was born out of cruelty. In the end, though, Wihtwala succumbed to his injuries, and it's said that he never fully recovered from the wounds inflicted by Arwald at the end, and spent the rest of his days sickly, half a man. And despite his best efforts, the House of Wight actually outlasted the heretic king. You see, Arwald's sister, Queen of Kent, was the great-great-grandmother of Alfred the Great. She is the matriarch of a dynasty that has outlasted all of them and lasted onwards even through to the House of Windsor today. That, my friends, is the story of the last pagan king. So there's one last part of this. There's a character that I spoke about in here, Irstapa. Irstapa, translated basically, is the wanderer. And I chose that name specifically because there is an Anglo-Saxon poem that I feel captures what it must have been like to be this wandering man after the loss of all his kin. And I'd like to read that for you. Irstapa, the wanderer, he was alone, he was lost, he was defeated. This bit of artwork that you'll see here is the picture of the Five of Swords that I drew for a set of tarot cards, and inspired by this character, because that particular card is about defeat and loss. And there he stands at the bloodless tree, laying the swords of his fallen comrades. And so onto the poem.
Often the solitary one finds for himself the mercy of the Lord, although he, sorry-hearted, must for a long time move by hand along the waterways, the ice-cold sea, tread the paths of exile. The weird always go where they must. So spoke the wanderer, mindful of hardships, of fierce slaughters, and downfall of his kinsmen. Often, or always, I had alone to speak of my troubles, each morning before dawn. There is none now living to whom I dare clearly speak of my innermost thoughts. I know it truly, that it is in men on a noble custom. The one should keep secure his spirit chest, guard his treasure chamber, think as he wishes. The weary spirit cannot withstand the weird, nor does a rough or sorrowful mind do any good. Thus those eager for glory often keep secure dreary thoughts in their breast. So I, often wretched and sorrowful, bereft of my homeland, far from noble kinsmen, have had to bind in fetters my innermost thoughts. Since long years ago I hid my Lord in the darkness of the earth, and I, wretched from there, travelled most sorrowfully over the frozen waves, sought, sad at the lack of a hall, a giver of treasure, where I, far or near, might find one in the mead hall who knew my people, or wished to console the friendless one, entertain with delights. He who has tried it knows how cruel is sorrow as a companion to the one who has few beloved friends. The path of the Wihtwalda holds him, not at all twisted gold, a frozen spirit, not the bounty of the earth. He remembers hall warriors and the giving of treasure, how in youth his lord accustomed him to the feasting. All the joy has died. And so he knows it, he who must forego for a long time the counsels of his beloved Lord. Then sorrow and sleep both together often tie up the wretched solitary one. He thinks in his mind that he remembers and embraces and kisses his Lord, and on his knees lays his hands and his head, just as at times before, in days gone by, as he enjoyed the gift seat. Then the friendless man wakes up again. He sees before him fellow waves, sea birds bathe, preening their feathers, frost and snow fall, mixed with hail. Then are the heavier the wounded hearts, grievous with longing for the Lord. Sorrow is renewed when the mind surveys the memories of kinsmen. He greets them joyfully, eagerly scans the companions of men. They always swim away. The spirit of seafarers never bring back them much in the way of known speech. Care is renewed for the one who must send very often over the binding of the waves a weary heart. Indeed, I cannot think why my spirit does not darken when I ponder on the whole life of men throughout the world. How they suddenly left the hall, the proud thanes. So this middle earth, a bit each day, droops and decays. Therefore men cannot call themselves wise before he has a share in years in the world. A wise man must be patient. He must never be too impressive, nor too hasty of speech, nor too weak a warrior, nor too reckless, nor too fearful, nor too cheerful, nor too greedy for goods, nor ever too eager for boasts. Before he sees clearly, a man must wait when he seeks oaths, until the proud-hearted one sees clearly whither the intent of his heart will turn. A wise hero must realize how terrible it will be when all the wealth of his world lies waste. So now in various places throughout the Middle Earth, walls stand, blown by the wind, covered with frost. Storms swept the buildings, the halls decay, their lords lie depraved of joy. The whole troop has fallen, the proud ones by the wall. War took off some, carried them on their way. One the bird took off across the deep sea. One the grey wolf shared one with death. One the dreary-faced man buried in a grave. And so he destroyed his city, he, the creator of men, until deprived of the noise of the citizens, the ancient work of giants stood empty. He who thought wisely on the formation and pondered deeply on the dark life, wise in spirit, remembered often from afar many complex, and spoke these words: Where is the horse gone? Where the rider? Where the giver of treasure? Where are the seats at the feast? Where are the revels in the hall? Alas from the bright cup, alas from the mailed warrior, alas from the splendour of the prince. How that time has passed away, deep and dark under the dark cover of night, as if it had never been. Now there stands in the trace of the beloved troop a wall wondrously high, wound round with serpents, the warriors taken off by the glory of spears, the weapons greedy for slaughter, the famous fate. And storms beat these rocky cliffs, falling frost fetters the earth, the harbinger of winter. Then dark comes, night shadows deepen, often the north comes, a rough hailstorm of malice amongst men. All is troublesome in the earthly kingdom. The turn of events changes. The world under the heavens. Here money is fleeting, here friends is fleeting, here man is fleeting, here kinsman is fleeting. All the foundation of this world turns to waste. So spake the wise man in his mind, where he sat apart in council. Good is he who keeps his faith, and the wanderer must never speak his grief of his breast too quickly, unless he already knows the remedy. A hero must act with courage. It is better for the one that speaks mercy, consolation from the Father in heavens, where, for us, all permanence rests.
So over to you guys. Does anyone have any questions? Anyone that's interested in any of the wording that I used? Would like to know anything, please? No?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to ask you about the succession through to House of Windsor. I know you're not going to say if it's true or not, but is it true?
Yes, it's true. Yes, it's true.
Yeah.
Yep, it is absolutely true. Yep. The sister of Arwald did marry the King of Kent. She was the great great grandmother of Alfred the Great, and you can basically plot the lineage straight through to the Queen today. So the House of Wight is the matriarch of our royal family, and a lot of the European royal family, of course, as well.
Enjoyed it very much.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I like your artwork too. It's good.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I've kind of really got into the medieval style of art of late. So yeah. Any other questions? Anyone? Comments?
It was very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I loved it. Very good.
Yeah.
And
My
my apologies for arriving late. Sorry about that.
No problem. Unfortunately, I knew it was going to be a rather long one, so I kind of had to start as bang on as possible. But if anyone did start late, did join late, and they do want me to read the story to them again, I'm quite happy to do that. Just let me know.
Paul, are you planning on doing any more of these?
I am. Yes, I am, Steve. Yeah.
Excellent.
I don't know. Probably. Yeah, I've got a couple of ideas. What I'd like to do is pick some of the lesser known festivals and things. I'm thinking of maybe doing some storytelling around each of the full moons or something along those lines. excuse me, sorry. after talking for an hour, my voice has gone a little bit wonky. Yeah, so I've got some ideas there. Last year I put out a magazine, and part of that magazine I did a calendar, which was like a plant or tree calendar, but also that then morphed into a magical items type thing. So my thoughts are along the lines of, and if I can just find it, yeah, doing something probably yeah, I'm not really sure yet, but where are we? March, April. So May is what's called the milking moon. I was thinking of doing something in June, which is the raven moon, which is kind of devoted to Woden. July, the heart moon, which is the story of the white deer of the island. The fox moon in August, which goes on to tell the story of the Fox King and Arwald. The harvest moon in September, maybe. We'll see. Winter moon. There's a blood moon in November. So there's those. So I've got a number of different ones up my sleeve, really.
Excellent. Excellent.
Mhm.
Sorry, Paul. I was about to ask a question, and then my connection was lost.
No problem. Go away.
Very briefly,
away,
so that's why I ended up speaking up.
Yeah. Ask away.
Slightly trickier question, but what would you say? What's the one thing you would say has been, expresses Arwald's biggest influence on the culture of the Isle of Wight?
Well, it's interesting you should say that. It feels like Arwald is having a renaissance, a resurgence, a very small one, but it's starting to be a bit more a resurgence. I think he embodies strength and independence, and the staunch independence of the island. And the island has always been known for doing its own thing in its own way. And I think Arwald really embodies that philosophy. Let's take the whole idea of him being the last pagan king. So before Arwald was king, the Roman Church came over and converted the island, and as soon as the priests left, the islanders gave a big two fingers up to everyone and went back to their pagan ways. Take Reformation. So when the reformers came and tried to take all the Catholics' idolatry away, as soon as they left the island, they went straight back to being Catholic. So I think it embodies that strength and determination. But I like to also think that it embodies, although it embodies the independence, but also a broader mindset, looking at the island as a place that needs to be preserved, and of beauty and of magic and of solitude, and a place that is a place for the wanderer to come back to, a place for us to settle and look after those that need to have that special place. Does that answer your question? I might have been rambling a bit.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, that's a good answer.
It's very apt as well, because I'm actually from the island originally. I was born there, lived there for 28 years,
Okay.
left left 25 years ago, and I'm planning on returning very soon.
It
So
never leaves.
about coming back to the island, a place to live is that was just like, whoa.
It never leaves you, really, does it?
Oh man.
My family,
all my family are still there, and so
Yeah.
I visit regularly. You know, and, it's
Yeah.
calling. It's calling me back.
It does. I think it does, and I think that's one of the things that has always attracted me to this story. I mean, and it's lovely that it's seeing a resurgence, and a real interest in that part of our history, not just the history that people think they know.
Yeah, it was the part I didn't know.
Well, I'm glad you learned something.
Absolutely. That's why I want to know if there's more stories coming, because
There are. Yes, they're definitely more. Oh, you're off, Diana.
Yes, thank you very much, Paul. Really enjoyed it, and I'd love to find out about your next ones.
No problem. I will definitely be posting.
Thank you.
I'll
What
definitely
days
be
are you
posting.
on Texas Radio then? When's your show?
Monday nights between 9 and 10, and then it's repeated 10 to 11 on Saturday nights.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Bye all. Stay safe.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye.
Any other questions? Anyone that
I have one, if you don't mind. Thank you very much for your story. I really enjoyed it. I was wondering if, I don't know if this is your wheelhouse, but can you tell us a bit more about what Arwald's beliefs might have been as the last pagan king?
Yeah. So the beliefs of, for want of a better name, the Anglo-Saxon. Let me just take a step back for a second. So for the longest time, the Germanic people of England, or what became England, has kind of been lumped together as Anglo-Saxons, but they weren't a combined people. The Saxons didn't like the Angles didn't like the Saxons. They both hated the Jutes, and the only thing that kind of combined that they held in common was a basic tongue. The Saxons could understand the Angles, they could understand the Jutes, but the Jutes couldn't understand the Angles, and the Angles couldn't understand the Jutes, but the Jutes could understand the Saxons. You know, so their languages were somewhat different, and also their religious beliefs. So the religious beliefs seem to be somewhat in line with the Norsemen, but you know, so you can draw direct parallels between Woden, or Woden as you would say in English, and Odin. So Frige, in the old tongue, you can say there's, you know, is the same as Frigg in the Norse. So it will be fairly similar, but there were differences, and we can piece together some of those from reading Anglo-Saxon poetry and the stories. Now, interestingly, if you read some of the Anglo-Saxon stories, some of the Anglo-Saxon poetry, you can actually see where the post-Christian influence has been injected in. You'll see postscripts and bits added on the end, which makes it you know, seem a little bit more Christianized. But if you kind of strip that stuff out, you start to get these glimpses into their religious beliefs. So they believed in Woden, they believed in Frige, as I said. There was a very enigmatic goddess Easter, where we get the name Easter from. And she seems to have been very much an Anglo-Saxon Jutish goddess, as there's no, and although she has been seen, she's been equated with Austere, or Osteria, but there doesn't seem to be any link between them. So they seem to have had their own gods and goddesses distinct from the Norse, but but they do share that. So, well, I have taken liberties with my own writings. I have taken, in some cases, created a more Anglo-Saxon Jutish god name. In some cases, or some cases I have actually taken the ones that actually have been talked about. I talk about the Fox King quite a lot, as a spirit. We know that the Jutes revered the fox, and it was very important to them. And so there seems to be a combination of this Norse type gods and goddesses and a nature based belief system. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Any other questions? Speak up. I keep seeing Drew walking around his house, getting a nice shot of your ceiling there.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Any other questions, guys? Please, happy to answer anything.
Well, where do you normally post up that you're going to do these sort of things? Because I managed to find it because somebody I know, reposted it.
So I post it out on my Twitter feed, also on Facebook. There's a number of groups there.
I mean, have you got your own group or something that you?
Yes. So I've got one that I have recently started, which is kind of devoted to what I call the Wihtlaw, or the Wihtlaw. You'll hear me use some terms quite a bit, and I'll quickly go into. And I know you asked about these groups and things, and I can give you all that detail. But so I'll use certain terms, and this goes back to Lizzie's question about beliefs, and this is kind of about the language. We don't know how they spoke. We can make a good guess. We know that they pronounced their W's as V's. We know they rolled their R's. We know what the language sounded like before what was called the Great Vowel Shift. So using that, and we can sort of reconstruct how it sounds. And then there's certain terms that the Old English, for want of a better name, was a very passionate language. They believed that every word was like a piece of magic, and they were very loose with how they built words. So compound words, just as in German, were very common, and the language changed from day to day because of that. And I've tried to build names and words in that sort of vein. So I'll use terms like the Wihtwalda, or if you were to say it in English, Wihtwalda. So Walda is basically, right, loose translation, king. Wit, W-H-I-T, or wit, king of Wight. So Wihtlaw, or Wihtlaw, or the stories, lore meaning the stories of the Isle of Wight. So coming back to your question, Steve, yes, I've got a group that's dedicated to the Wihtlaw. If you do a search on Wihtlaw, Wihttlore, on Facebook, you'll find it. If you go to www.wihtlaw.uk, you'll find my website. If you go to the Sacred Isle on Twitter, you'll find my Twitter account. So I post on all those places.
No, that's fine. I would just hate to miss out. That was all.
No. I would.
I couldn't guarantee that the same person is going to post up next time, and that would be at the end of it. So
yes,
right.
You know, do you use Twitter? If you use Twitter, follow me. I'm posting garbage all the time. Well, not garbage, but you know what I mean.
We'll do. We'll do.
Okay.
Okay,
any other
cool,
questions? No more. No one.
Yes, Paul.
Yep.
Hi, Paul. Steve, one of the I'm new to storytelling and that, but I'm interested in the mummers part. Are you aiming to sort of set up a mumming group where people meet and perform mumming plays and things?
Yes, we've got one. I've started one up for the Isle of Wight. We had our first get together earlier. John Bentley was there earlier today. Yes, if you do a search for Wight Mummers, you'll find them on Facebook. Please join us. We'll be having another get to know you session in the coming weeks. At the moment, obviously everything's quite virtual, but yeah, we are planning to. Well, I am planning to be doing mummers plays and storytelling in the wild, outside. Hopefully, when things are a little bit more safe.
Well, once I make it back to the island, I shall definitely look you up for that.
Yeah, well, it's open for everyone. You know,
my first ever performance was a mummers play when I was at school.
Oh, fantastic!
At Carisbrook High School, we did a mummers play when I was like 14. And,
oh, lovely!
We love it. Nice to go full circle and come back to the island and do it again. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I'm quite passionate about it.
But Steve, was a Mr. Ian Watterson involved in that at Carisbrook?
Name rings a bell.
He was a teacher there, and I know he does a mumming play on Boxing Day at the Dairyman's Daughter.
Dairyman's Daughter.
Very good.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait to get back now.
Well, the island can't wait to have you back.
Excellent, excellent.
Anything else, anyone?
No.
If we stay much longer, I'll have to put a light on because it's got dark while I've been sitting here.
Yeah,
the sun was shining when I put this computer on.
So thank you very much, everyone. Very much appreciated having you join me. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed putting it on. Sorry about the little hiccup with my my images. You know, next time I'll get that to work a little bit better.
It's an excellent story, though.
Thank you.
Yeah,
that was
sure
very much. I started that story last year, and I just sort of outlined how I thought it might fit together and put it away. And then every year I do something for this day to commemorate Arwald. And then I thought, you know, what can I do this year? And so I basically went and sat up on the cliff where I think the invasion would have happened. Sat there and I took my my iPad and wrote today, and I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. And what I read today is about half of what I wrote. So there's more to this story. So maybe I'll pull that together at some stage.
Turn it into a mummers play, Paul.
Maybe Maybe we should.
And then bring
Wow,
Arwald.
it would so work, wouldn't it? That would so work as a mummer's play.
And he could bring Arwald back to life in
The goodies and the baddies
in the tradition of mummery.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And
It's
one
there,
of the
All the characters.
And the characters of the time,
yeah. I think he's just such a wonderful character, and he's one of these characters, you know, that we know so little about, which means that we can build so
artistic
much
license.
Yeah, but I think there's this essence, interestingly, there was a book that was brought out. It's a Victorian book which tells the story of this battle, but it's written from Wihtwala's point of view, and it's very much of its time, where Arwald is painted as the bad guy. You know, he's the filthy pagan, you know, the Satan worshipping, bloodthirsty pagan, and Wihtwala is seen as the savior of the people of the Isle of Wight. And it's a very interesting read, and it's taken me like 4 times to try and read this book. It's terrible, but it's, for me though, I think Arwald should instill all that is good and just and right. That's how I feel about it.
Is there any memorial to him on the island?
Not
There's nothing I remember.
I don't think so, no.
So
there should be.
So there is 3 places where he could be. One that has very, very high credentials, a burial mound that there was a high status sword found there, as well as a high status brooch, and some other bits of jewelry in this burial mound. And it is Anglo-Saxon, and it's the right time period. And the interesting thing about it was that the person was cremated. Now, the Anglo-Saxons didn't cremate, they buried. They only cremated in the most extreme circumstances. In the case of an impending genocide, perhaps, where they don't want the body to be desecrated, maybe. I'm taking a liberty here. There's no archaeological evidence. So if I was to put my historian hat on, I'd be saying, Paul, you're telling garbage. But with my folklorist hat on, I like to think that, you know, that it's a pretty good candidate. But there is no made memorial to Arwald, though I think there should be. Maybe that's something one day I will create.
Yeah, I'll join you.
Any other questions? No. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining.
Just one quick one.
Yep.
I missed the story. So is that going to be on YouTube?
Yeah. So I'll probably
somewhere.
Yeah. So I'll probably I will do some editing on that, because I screwed up the images and things for it, but I'll fix that up and get that up there in the next few days.
Great.
And yeah, so that'll be up there, and
I'll look out for that then.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. And just so, yeah, so it should be in the next. It'll be over the weekend probably that I'll get to it, because tomorrow I've got, you know, other stuff to do. But yeah. Right.
Great.
Thank you very much.
All done then?
Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Till next time.
Until next time. Thank
Yeah.
you so much, everyone.
Bye,
Thank
Paul.
you.
Bye,
Okay,
John.
bye.
Bye.